So after you hear my story, you might be confused as to why I'm such a happy person. You see, growing up, my sister Mary and I lived in a small town. Our parents were kind and loving people. They always made sure that we were happy. And although we weren't wealthy, they had a way of making money stretch so that all our needs were taken care of. Unfortunately, when I was 14 and my sister was 12, they were involved in a terrible accident. They were out running errands and were driving on the highway when their car hit a patch of ice and spun out and caused a massive car accident. Losing our parents at such a young age was almost too much for us to take, but we still had each other, and while we were close, we did become even closer as a result. Not only were we siblings, but we became best friends as well. Not long after the funeral, our grandparents took us in and did their best to fill our parents' roles, to the best of their abilities. It was a huge adjustment, but we leaned on each other for support and guidance, and both of us managed to do well in school. We both went to university and graduated at the top of our respective classes. I became a civil engineer, while my sister became a pharmacist. Sadly, our grandparents passed away soon after we graduated, once again leaving us alone. Being orphaned for the second time in our young lives was hard to handle, but we did our best to persevere. Between the money from our new careers and the inheritance that we received from both our parents and now our grandparents, we were able to buy a house and a car for each of us. For some siblings, this would have been an awkward situation, but we didn't mind. The house that we bought was big enough that we barely saw each other. I mainly lived on the first floor while my sister lived on the second. For a while, we focused on our careers and were happy, until once again, tragedy paid us a visit. I was inspecting a high-rise that I had helped to design when a crane operator hit the building above me and caused some building materials to fall and land on me. All I can remember is looking up and seeing wood and steel falling above me, and then waking up in the hospital. Thankfully, I recovered, but my spine had been severely damaged. With a lot of physical therapy, I would be able to one day be able to stand and walk short distances, but I would need a wheelchair for the rest of my life. For months, I was depressed, but Mary lifted my spirits. She took care of me and kept pushing me to do my best with my physical therapy. If it weren't for her, I'm not sure that I would ever walk again. I was so grateful for her. A few years later, though, I'm sorry to say that I was shocked to hear what would normally be happy news.
Henry, I have some great news.
Oh, what's that, sis?
I've been seeing this boy, Jared, and last night he proposed to me and I said yes. Henry, I'm getting married.
I know that I should have been excited for her, but unfortunately, all I could think about was that I would be all alone, that there was a chance that I might lose my best friend. Thankfully, though, I chased those feelings away, as I knew that Mary had always been there for me, and even if she got married, none of that would change. And so I began to feel just as excited as she felt, and I cheered the wondrous news. A week later, she introduced me to her new fiancé. And at first he seemed okay, but there were subtle things that made me question if he was the right one for her.
Henry, this is my fiancé, Jared.
Hello, Jared. It's a pleasure to meet you. Yeah. It's nice to meet you too. So, Mary was saying that since your parents are dead, that she wanted you to walk her down the aisle for the ceremony. With your chair, how are you supposed to be able to do that? Well, I can actually walk short distances, but it takes a lot out of me. Oh, I see.
Yeah, it will be beautiful, and it will mean a lot to me too. Plus, he can lean on me for support as well.
I don't think Mary saw it, but Jared made a face when she said this. If he was trying to hide his disgust of my wheelchair, then he wasn't hiding it very well. The weeks passed, and the two of them discussed more of the wedding plans. A few times, Jared asked if Mary didn't want his father to walk her down the aisle instead, but she was adamant that I do it. I honestly felt like he was embarrassed that I would be a part of the ceremony. During this time, Jared moved in with us and began to make quite the mess around the house. He would even leave dirty dishes in my portion of the house. I tried to bring this up to Mary, but she just brushed it off. Between work and planning for the wedding, she was doing all that she could, and so I made plans to speak with Jared and establish some ground rules. Feeling confident, I went into the living room to speak with him, but he was nowhere to be seen. He did, however, leave his cell phone on the couch. Normally, I would never dream of looking at someone else's phone, but it was vibrating like crazy. I was curious, And so I picked it up and saw that he had received several messages from two different women, one named Wanda and the other Stacy. I know that I shouldn't have read their messages, but I needed to know who they were, and they both were thanking him for the lovely gifts that he had given them, and for the amazing dates that he was taking them on. I could tell that neither knew about the other, and I definitely suspected that my sister didn't know about them. Suddenly, I heard someone coming down the stairs and I braced myself to confront Jared about how he was treating my sister, when both my sister and Jared came into the room. "Jared, do you have something to tell my sister? Maybe you would like to introduce her to Wanda, or maybe to Stacy."
Oh, Henry, what on earth are you talking about?
"You see? This is why I don't want his crippled butt at the wedding. He's trying to wedge himself in between us. He can't stand that we're happy and that he isn't, so he is trying to break us up."
Henry, please tell me this isn't true.
"Of course it isn't. I've only ever wanted you to be happy. But not only does he hate me just because I'm crippled, but he's also cheating on you too." I quickly threw Jared's phone to Mary, who looked at it and instantly got angry once she started reading the messages. "Hey, that's my phone! How dare you look at it?" Before my sister could respond, Jared slapped her so hard she fell to the floor and then grabbed his phone. It looked like he was going to hit her again, so I quickly wheeled over and began punching him. While I may be stuck in a wheelchair, I do have very strong arms, and after hitting him a few times, he got scared and then ran out of the house. Once, I was able to calm my sister down and make sure that she wasn't seriously hurt. We called the police and reported that Jared had assaulted my sister. It didn't take long for the police to find and arrest him. As it turned out, this hadn't been the first time that he had assaulted a woman before. This made the judge that was assigned to his case very strict on him, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She was devastated, but of course she called off the wedding after learning what kind of man that Jared truly was. Heartbroken, she leaned on me, and I did my best to support her through the healing process. The one positive thing that I took away from this, though, was that I was a bit too reliant on the idea that it would always be just my sister and I. And so, even though it was difficult, I moved out and got a house of my own. This opened up a lot of doors for both of us, and I'm happy to say that not long afterwards that Mary met someone amazing who treated her like a queen. We even became good friends as well. As for me, well, it took a bit longer as I'm very shy, but I'm happy to say that I recently got engaged, and you would never guess what happened. Since Mary had pushed me so much with my physical therapy, not only was I able to walk her down the aisle for her wedding to her new boyfriend, but I did so for my own as well. In fact, I no longer even need my wheelchair. My future has never looked brighter. Thanks for watching, like, share, and subscribe.
Hey everyone! I'm Hannah, and I recently turned 16. Despite my young age, I live with my boyfriend Angelo and his parents. This is the result of the actions of my completely cruel, jealous, and narcissistic mom. Here's my story. Ever since I was a child, my mom had been quite abusive and never hesitated to threaten me or my little sister May, who is 11 years old now and living with our dad. Oftentimes, my dad was at work, and there was really nothing he could do to help us. My mom and dad would have lots of fights about the way that she treated us, but no matter what he said, she continued to be cruel.
Hannah, get downstairs right now.
I remember one instance where I was just playing with some toys in my room when my mother had called me down. I was confused, but complied. Yes, Mom?
Didn't I tell you to do the dishes? What kind of stupid kid are you? You can't expect me to be doing all the work in the house.
I can't reach the sink, Mom. I'm sorry. But I did all of the laundry and even ironed it.
That's not good enough. I can't believe I gave birth to such a useless kid.
I still remember that day and how it played out. Mom had grabbed me and dragged me to the backyard. She dunked me into the pool and held my head in there, claiming that it was to make me learn. The drowning and suffocating feeling that I experienced still hasn't left me, and I now have a deep phobia of swimming. I was only 6 years old at the time. May was only 1 when this happened. But as she got older, my mom only seemed to get more and more annoyed with us. She would constantly ignore us and complained endlessly about how we were just money and time wasters. If we ever saw a mother with her newborn baby, Akuma would begin warning her about the hell that she'd be enduring in no time. Which is just sickening to think about. because as a new mother, you should be proud. When I was 8, my mom painfully left a scar on my hand from a pan that she'd just been cooking with. Her reason for that was because I'd grown out of my clothes and she was annoyed that she needed to spend money on more. Over time, my mom would keep acting narcissistic and rude towards me, forcing me to do all of her chores and physically hurting me when I didn't do it to the max. But even if I did do what was told of me, my mom would have a complete mood change and hurt me anyway. I experienced this for most days in my childhood, and at the end of every day I would wait for my dad to come home so I could cry in his arms. My dad, Thomas, was a very compassionate man who worked very hard to support his family. He felt disheartened to know that his wife was hurting me and my sister, but couldn't risk missing work or else he could get fired. When I was 9, my parents divorced and a big fight happened, where my dad and mom fought over the custody rights of me and May. It dragged on for a long time, but my mom ended up lying and got full custody of both my sister and I. Thomas was ordered to pay a large amount of money to Akuma for child support. We didn't see our dad again for a long time after that, which was devastating for me and my little sister. I was 11 years old when my mom began becoming weirder and more desperate, should I call it. By then, I've learned to just keep my head down and do whatever she ordered me to do, even if I was completely worn out by the end of it.
May! Hannah!
My sister and I walked over to my mom with confusion.
We need money, so I've decided that you and your sister are to go out on the street and beg for it. And don't come back until you have enough for the rent.
Huh?
Don't make me repeat myself. Get down there and beg. Don't make me take you to the pool again.
I shivered at the mention of the word pool and decided to comply. At least if I did this for her, then I wouldn't have to experience the pool again. Hopefully. My mom smirked and handed both me signs to hold up that read "Need money for food" and sent us on our way. We lived pretty close to a crowded area, so it was easy to find people that took pity on us and gave what they could. I felt guilty scamming people like that, but I knew that if I didn't do as I was instructed, that our mother would hurt us, and so I tried to look as pathetic as possible to get as much sympathy from people as I could. Not long after that, our mother then forced us to start pickpocketing people and to even break into our neighbors' homes with her help. She would sell the things that we stole and keep the money for herself. We were forced to hand over the money that we collected from pickpocketing or begging to our mom, and at that point it was obvious why. She needed money. But how could this add up if my dad was paying a hefty sum of child support? After seeing how my mom was keeping all the money to herself, I began to take some of the money that we stole or begged for and hide a few dollars for myself and keep it in my room. I had May do the same. Over time, the money accumulated, and I was able to get myself and May our own cheap flip phones. By the time I was 13, I ended up being able to save around $500, which was more than enough to help myself. Time rolled by slowly as I grew depressed and more pent-up anger boiled inside of me. I couldn't wait to get out of here. Shortly after high school had started, a cute guy from my stats class came up to me and asked for my number. His name was Angelo, and we hit it off right away, soon garnering the title of boyfriend and girlfriend. I loved our relationship as it was nurturing and healthy, unlike the ones I had at home. As usual, I made sure to keep this a secret from my mom, and I was successful until one unexpected day. I came home to see my room flipped almost completely upside down. There were papers scattered everywhere, and my heart sank when I saw what they were. The love letters Angelo had written me. I turned to leave the room, but my mom happened to be blocking it. Mom?
Welcome back, you tramp. I was just digging around when I found those lovely papers.
Mom, that's none of your business. That's my life. Angelo's my boyfriend. Why would you even search through my room like that?
Well, I gave birth to you, so you are my property, which means that I get to make the rules. Who taught you to be such a filthy girl? You disgust me, and look what's going to happen.
I watched in absolute horror as my mom lit a match and tossed it onto the papers, setting them ablaze. Soon my bed sheets caught on fire as well, and I worked quickly to put the fire out. Finally, when it had turned to black ash, I glared at my mom. What is wrong with you? I've been nothing but obedient my entire life and tried to make you happy, but it was never enough. You don't understand how much physical and mental pain you've caused me? How I spent endless nights crying myself to sleep because you've never been a good enough mother to me and May? How I wished that Dad had gotten us instead of you. I couldn't stop letting the tears flow as I screamed at my mom. Her eyes glazed over at me lazily, and a smile tugged at the corner of her lip. There was something about the way she was looking at me that sent shivers down my spine, when suddenly there was a loud bang as the door to our home was forced open and police officers rushed in. I watched as my mom's face completely dropped and she shot a death glare at me as if I had something to do with it, just as the officers grabbed her and threw her to the ground. After she was handcuffed, my father and May walked into the apartment. My eyes widened when I saw my little sister, and she immediately ran into my arms when she noticed me.
It's going to be okay now, sis. I couldn't take it anymore, so I used the internet to figure out where Dad was. I then went and found Dad, and together we went to the police. The police rushed over here as soon as we told them that you were still in danger.
Just as May came over to me, Akuma broke free from the officers and tried to kick May. Thankfully, the police wrestled her back to the ground before she could actually hurt her. They then dragged her away, leaving May and I with Thomas. He looked a bit older and tired, but also less stressed, if that made sense. It was like leaving his wife made his life easier, but losing his kids made it hell.
We will have to go to the police station later and give our side of the story, but for now, let's just enjoy this moment of peace.
She was right. It felt liberating to know that for the first time in years, that we were safe. At least for the moment. I called up Angelo and he joined us, and I introduced him to Thomas. It was a bit awkward, but they bonded over the fact that they both cared for me. Later, we went down to the police station and gave our statements and told them about everything that our mother had done and had forced Yus to do. The officers were shocked at how cruel she had been. Afterwards, the officers let Thomas take May home with him, and after a bit of convincing, they allowed me to stay with Angelo and live with him. The trial surrounding my mom started fairly quickly, and the jury decided that she was guilty on all counts of child abuse, negligence, delinquency of a minor, and theft. My mom was fined $15,000 to pay off the child support she now owed my dad in return. She was also sentenced to 30 years in jail without parole. That was good enough. By the time she gets out, the old hag will be about 80 years old. My sister and I both took the witness stand, and after the trial, my family went out to celebrate. Angelo's family was there too, and for the first time since ever, I felt at peace. I was finally going to be surrounded by the people who actually cared for me. Today, I'm still with my boyfriend. I've been seeing a therapist for my trauma, and I still keep in touch with my dad and sister. As for my mom, she's still rotting in prison, depressed and alone. The inmates found out she hurt her children and were not tolerant of that. From what I've heard, she has been sent to the prison infirmary more than once. As serious as the crimes that the other inmates committed, they didn't tolerate people that hurt children. So what do you think? Thank you for listening to my story. Hi, my name is Clara and I am 23 years old. I have an older sister named Lucy and a younger brother named Blake. My husband Carl and I are actually a newlywed couple, and we have been unbelievably happy for the past 2 months. But our wedding was where my relationship with my brother was incredibly skewered. Here is how everything unfolded. My brother is 17 years old, and he had known Carl since he was about 11. Blake and Carl had always clicked the moment that they met, seeing as they had similar interests in games and sports. Carl soon saw Blake as his own brother, and there was never a dull moment when the two of them were together. When Carl proposed to me 2 years ago, Blake was 15 and absolutely ecstatic. He wouldn't stop going on and on about how Carl was going to be officially part of the family. I thought this was incredibly sweet of him and couldn't wait to get married either. My sister Lucy was incredibly excited as well and almost immediately began to sort out decoration preparations.
Dude, guess what? My sister is getting married. Isn't that right, Clara?
I smiled to myself when I heard Blake excitedly say to his friends,
Clara, look at these flower combinations I've come up with.
Naturally, I was very happy that my siblings were also very ecstatic about my engagement to Carl. My parents were also supportive of this, even though our relationship wasn't the most stable. They loved Carl and knew that we would work out well together. My parents even offered to pitch in some for the wedding costs, but I refused, understanding their care but knowing that Carl and I could handle this ourselves. And so Carl and I worked on the wedding preparations for a while, with Blake even wanting to help for a while. But a while after he'd turned 16, things went downhill from there. Blake had suddenly become obsessed with doing anything that would potentially hurt me, physically or emotionally. And the only thing I had to ask was, why? Blake, What are you and your friends doing?
We're just making a short video. Go mind your own business.
I was absolutely shocked. For my own brother to come over and just waste my expensive groceries on a stupid trend and then call me such a degrading word like that. I really couldn't believe that this is how he turned out to be. Because this was the first time that I'd seen him do something like this, I let it drop because I thought that it would be the last time he did. Turns out I was wrong. Blake kept using my stuff and home to make content for himself. He committed heinous acts that I was completely sick of from the start, such as putting glue on my toilet seat, breaking a window in the house, and even using spray paint on my garage door. I tried countless times to complain about this to my parents, but of course neither of them listened. Blake was their favorite child and one of his school's best athletes, so everyone thought he was some sort of kind and respectful student. I was out at dinner one night with my fiancé and my mom, attempting to explain this situation to her again. Mom, have you seen Blake's online videos? Those are all my groceries and my furniture getting destroyed. Can't you just help me talk to him? Huh?
Clara, I really don't see what the problem is. It's only a little bit of lighthearted fun. Just be more nice to him when he goes to visit you.
Be nice to him? How did my mom think I treated my own little brother? I just shook my head and sighed, carrying on and eating my meal. As I attempted to bring it up once more, my mom quickly changed the subject to my wedding and asked if Blake was going to be the best man.
Yeah, we were considering making Blake the best man. Clara, shaken. He won't though if he keeps deciding to pull those stupid tricks.
Of course he'll be the best man. He's your damned brother. I better see him up with the groom in a couple of months. And do you mind paying for his tux as well? I just thought that my beautiful daughter would be able to help her brother for the wedding.
Yeah, sure, we'll pay for it. It's not a problem.
There is no way that this is happening right now. I got up and stormed over to the counter, paying for the meal before running out of the restaurant. Carl followed after me whilst my mom sat there looking dazed. That night, Carl and I had a long talk about the issues that I've had with my family. He listened to me carefully while I began to cry, and then calmed me down a bit later. We came to a compromise that for the meantime, Blake will be getting a new suit. But the moment that he does something that crosses the line, we're returning it and kicking him from the groomsmen. I texted my little brother and told him that if he does not stop doing what he does, I'll make sure he pays for it. Blake didn't say anything, but I knew he'd seen it. Luckily, he didn't do anything to me for the next 3 months while I was frantically going around with my sister Lucy to prepare for my wedding. And flash forward to my wedding day, everything was going as normal. Blake was in his suit, which made my parents incredibly happy and teary-eyed. My sister looked absolutely stunning as she greeted guests, and I was excited as I waited for the ceremony to start.
Oh my gosh, Michael, it's great to see you here.
Mom, why is Michael here?
Don't be so dense. So what if your ex-boyfriend wants to celebrate your new journey? Ooh, Blake's invited some of his boys too. Clara, why?
Blake invited people? I couldn't believe it. There are clear rules and invitations, including the maximum amount of +1s you can bring. My brother could only invite one person, but my heart sank when I saw around 3 of his friends standing around and goofing around. I chose to go to my room and wait until it was my turn to come out. When the ceremony began, I walked down the aisle and everything up to the kiss went perfectly. When it was time to cut the cake, though, everything went south from there. As I was cutting into the cake with my now husband, I was hit with a big splash of water. I gasped in shock and my eyes darted around. Oh my God. Blake's friends were laughing maniacally and recording the entire thing. I was dripping from head to toe and began to sob whilst running away. Carl was fuming and asked for the boys to be removed from the venue. Crying in my room, I was found by Carl and he calmed me down. We knew what we had to do. About a week later, my mom called me and forced me to attend Blake's graduation ceremony. I began to protest, but my husband quickly explained that this was the perfect opportunity to get back at him. Students were getting called up as the ceremony began. When Blake was called, everyone could read the words on his cap and gown that said he was a cheater and a thief, and loud talking began erupting through the stadium. Blake looked around with a smile, but it quickly dropped when 2 girls walked up to the stage. Perfect timing. I couldn't help but laugh.
Blake, how could you cheat on me with a girl from another school? You're a sicko and I hope to never speak to you again.
You were the perfect guy until I found out you've been unfaithful to both Emily and me. Absolutely unbelievable. Everybody heard what was going on and began to laugh and talk. Blake fell onto his knees and was crying in embarrassment and partial anger. Nobody was going to let him forget this. Blake's now ex-girlfriend and ex-fling walked up to us and smiled, happy to help us with this. That night, both Lucy and my brother, along with my parents and husband, were all seated at dinner together. Blake was glaring furiously at Lucy, Carl, and I, and so were my parents.
Why would you ever do something like this?
Well, do you not remember what happened at my wedding and everything that Blake had done to me? I'm still surprised that you're on his side after all of this.
On the internet in a terrible way. All my classmates won't respond to my calls.
Well, I'm sorry about that, but honestly, you kind of deserved it for being a real piece of work for Clara.
Well, Clara has a point. Blake, everything that I've seen you do for the past months was completely unacceptable, and I cannot let you just get away with a bit of online embarrassment. You're going to be doing housework for Clara and Carl for the next year. My life is ruined. You can't do that. I need to travel and have fun. No way, young man.
I watched in amusement as Daniel dragged Blake outside and my mother followed. I hear Blake screaming once again before their car pulled out of the driveway. Lucy, Carl, and I just high-fived and moved to the couch to watch a movie and celebrate our success. I still love Blake, but I can't wait for him to learn his lesson on not being such a jerk. Thanks for watching.
My name is Mark, and I am married to the most beautiful woman in the world. Inside and out, Agatha is amazing. She's kind, thoughtful, smart, gentle, and so forgiving. So, even when my parents treated her like she was dirt, she always made excuses for them and let it slide. See, my parents are paranoid. They came into a significant amount of money when they were young. They ran a successful computer business and sold the rights to a bunch of software they developed together. So, the money and lack of social interaction during their formative years made them suspicious of everyone. Agatha took it all in stride. She was the one who pointed out that they had a reason to be suspicious.
Your parents are just looking out for you. There are a lot of selfish people in the world who don't care about how you feel, only about what you have to offer them. And coming from where I came from, that would have only compounded their worry. So don't worry about it, okay? I love you and you love me, and that's all that's important.
She was just too nice. I tried talking to my parents about their attitude, begged them to reconsider their opinion on her, but they were stubborn. They refused to change, and I spent the evening after every time we met up apologizing. Agatha would just laugh it off. That changed.
I just don't know what you think you're up to, suggesting you move into a bigger house. Of course you just want to take full advantage of his money. I knew it from the beginning. I've been telling him this. But did he listen?
We were sitting at a table in a nice restaurant. I had wanted to tell my parents about our big news. We were moving house, but they had taken over the conversation with their snapped accusations and hard tones. We should never let someone like you marry our son. You've got confident with your attempts at taking over his money, and now you've shown your hands. Growing up poor like you doesn't excuse this kind of behavior, you filthy gold digger. Don't speak to her like that. Moving house was my idea. Agatha told me she was perfectly happy living where we were. The damage was done, though, because Agatha was crying, and had already left the table. I knew then that my parents had crossed a line. She liked them, in spite of their attitude towards her. They'd worked hard. And she said that she could tell the kind of people they were by the son they'd raised. But that evening, she'd found their words to be too much, and finally called them out for what they were. She came back before the end of the meal, paid the bill for everyone, and then turned to my parents.
I have been supportive of your attitudes for too long. I understood where your concern for your son stemmed from, and I never said a bad word against either of you. I respected you, your drive, and how you raised your son. But tonight we wanted to tell you that we were expecting a child, and that we were moving into a bigger house to prepare for that, but you let your prejudices get in the way. I've never expected Mark to pay for me. I've always provided half the rent and paid half the bills. I work a good job and work hard too. If you'd ever bothered to ask, you'd know that I never took advantage of his money. If you want a relationship with your grandchild, you'll want to reevaluate how you treat people, because no child of mine will be around this kind of behavior. Do you understand?
I was proud of Agatha for standing up for herself like that, but angry that my parents had ruined what was supposed to be an exciting evening. But the looks of horror on their faces was enough. They had been humiliated. And worst, they'd accused Agatha of being a gold digger, only to have their meals paid for out of her own pocket. Later that night, after we'd already been tucked up in bed and spent an hour talking about how she felt, I got a phone call. Hello? Is this Mark Thompson? I'm Dr. Clark. There was an accident. You need to come down to the hospital right away. What happened? Your parents' car was T-boned. They're in critical condition. We rushed to the hospital as fast as we could. The nurse directed us toward the room where my parents were. When we entered, I found that my mom was awake, but my dad was unconscious. They were both banged up. Agatha waited by the door. Mom, what happened?
We were driving, and then this car just T-boned us. They'd not stopped for the red light, I guess, because it was so late. But they're saying he ruptured a kidney. They don't think he's going to make it.
Agatha had disappeared by the time I turned back around. I wasn't sure if she was still too angry to be around my parents, or if she had gone to find coffee. Either way, I felt her absence keenly, and wished she was back at my side. I fell asleep before she returned, and when I woke up, she was waiting for me.
I spoke to the doctors about your dad's kidney, and we ran some tests. I'm a match.
What?
Your father needs a new kidney, Mark, and I am going to give him mine. And what do you expect to get in return for that? Nothing. If you never say a kind word to me, then it will still be worth it. I'm not saving his life for anything other than saving his life. Mark deserves to have his parents around. I'm sure you can understand that this doesn't benefit me at all.
But what about the baby?
The doctors promised me that it would be a safe procedure. They would do everything in their power to ensure that we both come out the other end in one piece.
The surgery went well, and when my father woke up, the doctors explained what had happened. He asked to speak to Agatha alone, and I waited anxiously to see if she was going to come out of the room regretting her choice. When she finally came out, I nearly fainted with anxiety. Are you all right?
I'm fine. He's fine too. The transplant is taking, just as the doctors hoped, and your father is grateful. He offered me a tidy sum of money for my efforts, but I think he finally understood that I wasn't in this for the money. He decided to put it in a college fund for our child, instead.
Mom seems to have come around too, and I think she wants to apologize.
She doesn't need to.
She does. The times when my parents were mean and rude to Agatha were a thing of the past. They finally saw her for her, rather than an image they had built up in their heads. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.